My mother said it the way she always said everything about me, casually, lightly, with a small laugh underneath the words, that gave everyone around her permission to find it charming rather than devastating. We were standing at the edge of the yard at the Calloway family reunion, 43 relatives, 3 folding tables, the smell of charcoal and cut grass, and my mother had just spotted the woman she did not recognize standing near the fence with a leather portfolio bag, and the quiet, observant posture of someone who was not there by accident. She took the woman's arm, steered her toward me like she was presenting an exhibit. "This," my mother said, with the confident warmth of someone performing hospitality for an audience, "is my daughter Renee. She's the one we don't really discuss." She laughed. 2 cousins nearby smiled automatically. The woman with the portfolio did not smile. She looked at me. Then she looked at my mother. Then she reached into her bag, pulled out a printed page, and placed it on the folding table between us. It was a mock-up, a magazine cover. My face was on it. "I'm sorry," the woman said, with the precise calm of someone who has decided exactly how much of her patience to extend. "Could you say that again?" My mother's laugh stopped. Before the story gets darker, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments what city you are watching from, because betrayal does not always come from strangers. Sometimes it sits at your kitchen table, calls you daughter, and waits for you to stop breathing. My name is Renee Calloway. I am 36 years old. For the past 12 years I have worked as a documentary filmmaker and visual journalist, and for the last 4 of those years I have been the subject of the kind of quiet, accumulating professional recognition that builds slowly and then, one day, arrives all at once in a form you were not expecting. I grew up in Clover, South Carolina, the middle of 3 children born to parents who had, early and apparently irrevocably, assigned each of us a role that organized the family's attention and resources. Like a seating chart, no one was ever allowed to rearrange. My older brother Derek was the successful one. Tall, confident, business degree. The kind of easy social fluency that made adults trust him in rooms before he had done anything to earn it. My younger sister Becca was the sweet one. Gentle, accommodating, the family's emotional center, the child my mother called her heart out loud at dinner tables in front of company, and me. I was the quiet one, the difficult one. The one who asked too many questions and disappeared into her room with a camera and came out with photographs nobody asked for. The one, as my mother refined it over the years, that the family didn't really discuss. Not because anything was wrong with me, because I did not fit the story she had decided to tell. My father was a high school history teacher who graded papers at the kitchen table every evening and believed, with the quiet conviction of a man who had spent 20 years watching young people discover their own capacity, that every person contains something worth finding. He found it in me early. He said almost nothing about it out loud. But he drove me to my first film screening at a community arts center when I was 17, sat in the back row, and cried during the 12-minute short I had made about the shuttered textile mill at the edge of town. He thought I didn't see him. I saw him. I always saw him. My mother, Linda Calloway, was a woman who understood the world primarily through the lens of how it appeared to others. She was not a malicious person. That was the complicated part. She volunteered at the church food pantry. She remembered birthdays. She brought casseroles to neighbors after surgeries and sent handwritten notes after funerals. In the architecture of her public life, she was generous and present and well-regarded. But inside the family, she was a curator. She curated Derek's accomplishments the way a museum curator arranges a permanent collection, deliberately, reverently, with every piece positioned to maximum effect. She curated Becca's warmth as proof of her own good mothering. And she curated me as the caveat, the asterisk, the footnote that made the rest of the collection look more impressive by contrast. The first time I heard the phrase "the one we don't discuss," I was 9 years old. A neighbor had asked my mother about her children. My mother described Derek first, his grades, his confidence, his future. Then Becca, her kindness, her smile, how much the teachers loved her. Then the neighbor asked, And you have a third one, don't you? My mother's expression shifted slightly. The way a person's expression shifts when they are asked about something they have not prepared a good answer for. Renee, she said. She's her own thing. The neighbor moved on. I was standing behind my mother's left shoulder the entire time. She never looked back. The pattern organized itself across decades with the quiet persistence of water finding every available crack. School performances. My mother attended Derek's debate tournaments with a schedule printed from the school website and a pride that was visible from across the gymnasium. She came to my school art exhibition once, in 7th grade, stood in front of my photographs for 45 seconds, said very nice without stopping moving, and spent the remaining 20 minutes of the evening talking to Derek's English teacher about his essay on the Revolutionary War. Birthday acknowledgements. Derek's birthdays were events, dinners at restaurants he chose, presents that reflected months of quiet attention to what he wanted, phone calls from extended family members my mother had personally alerted in advance. Mine arrived with a card signed by both parents and, in the years I was away from home, sometimes a day late. Family conversations. At every holiday dinner I can remember from ages 12 onward, the conversation's center of gravity was Derek's career, his corporate trajectory, his promotions, his apartment, the woman he was dating and whether she was suitable. My work existed in a conversation the way background music exists at a dinner party, technically present, but designed not to demand attention. And then there was the reunion comment. Every year at the Calloway family reunion, my mother gave what the family had taken to calling the update, an informal summary of each child's year, delivered while relatives circulated with plates and drinks and the easy half-attentive warmth of people who were present but not fully listening. Derek's updates were detailed, specific, delivered with the practiced pride of a woman who had prepared them. Becca's were warm, personal, stories about her children, her community, the way she showed up for people around her. Mine were 3 words. Renee is fine. 3 words. Every year. Renee is fine. Not what I was working on. Not where I had traveled. Not what I had built or found or made or published. Renee is fine. Like a reading on an instrument, nobody was particularly invested in monitoring. Reported because omitting it entirely might raise questions, but reported without any desire to expand. The year my first documentary screened at a regional film festival, I drove home for Thanksgiving and mentioned it during dinner. My mother nodded. That's wonderful, honey. Derek, tell everyone about the Chicago project. I finished my turkey. I drove home in the dark. I did not mention it again. The connection I had not anticipated arrived on a Tuesday morning in April, 3 months before the reunion. I was in my studio reviewing correspondence when an email arrived from a woman named Sylvia Park, features director at Portrait America, a quarterly publication that covered visual storytellers, documentary filmmakers, and the intersection of journalism and personal narrative. It had a circulation of 200,000 and was, within my industry, the kind of feature placement that changed the shape of a career. Sylvia had seen my most recent documentary, a feature-length film about 3 families in rural Appalachia navigating the closure of the last operational coal mine in their county. It had screened at 4 regional festivals and won 2 awards I had not yet told my family about because I had learned, over decades, that telling them produced the particular specific disappointment of sharing something important with people who had already decided it was not. Sylvia's email was direct and warm and entirely unexpected. She wanted to do a cover feature, photography, interview, a full profile of my work and methodology. She asked about logistics and timing. I replied the same afternoon. Over the following weeks, we exchanged emails about scheduling. At one point, I mentioned I would be in Clover, South Carolina over a summer weekend for a family gathering. I told her there was a historic textile mill at the edge of town worth photographing. If I'm in the area, she wrote back, I might just stop by. I did not think she meant it. She meant it. I want to be precise about what I did and did not do in the weeks before the reunion. I did not call my mother and tell her about the feature. I had learned across 36 years that sharing professional news with my mother before it was visible and undeniable produced, reliably, either a subject change or a 3-sentence acknowledgement, followed by an immediate pivot to Derek. I did not warn anyone that Sylvia might appear. I did not prepare a confrontation, rehearse a speech, or arrange anything designed to produce a particular outcome at a particular moment. What I did was 3 things. First, I replied to Sylvia's logistics email and mentioned the reunion's location and date, in case she wanted to see the mail that weekend. Second, I accepted the cover feature formally, something I had been hesitating on for 2 weeks out of a habit of preemptive smallness, so ingrained I had stopped recognizing it as a choice. Third, I drove to Clover on a Saturday morning in July in the same car I had been driving for 4 years, wearing the same kind of clothes I always wore, carrying nothing designed to announce anything. I was not arriving to prove something. I was arriving because my father had asked me to come. And I had never, in 36 years, said no to my father. The Calloway family reunion was held every July at my parents' house on Wentworth Road, the same house where I had grown up, where the living room wall held 14 framed photographs of Derek and Becca and 3 of me, and where the kitchen still smelled like the particular combination of sweet tea and wood polish and something faintly floral that I associated inextricably with the specific texture of being invisible in a room full of people who knew your name. I arrived at noon. The greetings confirmed what they always confirmed. Derek, you look fantastic. Becca, the kids are so big. Oh, Renee, you made it. I found my father in his usual position, lawn chair, edge of the yard, slightly removed from the crowd, a glass of sweet tea sweating in his hand. He squeezed my arm when I sat beside him. No words, he never needed many. I had been there for 90 minutes when Sylvia pulled into the driveway. I saw her before my mother did. Silver sedan, out-of-state plates, leather portfolio bag, the self-possessed unhurried movement of someone comfortable arriving in unfamiliar rooms. She spotted me and walked over. My mother spotted her 7 minutes later. I watched my mother cross the yard with the particular purposeful warmth she deployed for strangers at family events, the hostess mode, the performance of welcome that had been polished across decades of church functions and neighborhood dinners and the annual reunion itself. She reached us, looked at Sylvia, looked at me, and did what she had always done. She introduced me the way she had introduced me my entire life, as the footnote, the caveat, the one the family kept in the margins. This is my daughter Renee, she said, with the light dismissive warmth of someone sharing a charming family eccentricity. She's the one we don't really discuss, she laughed. Sylvia did not laugh. She looked at my mother with the steady, unhurried attention of a woman who had spent 20 years as a features journalist and had developed, across those 2 decades, a precise and well-calibrated sense of when a sentence required a response. I'm sorry, Sylvia said. Could you say that again? My mother blinked. I just mean, Renee's always been the quiet one. It's a family. Sylvia reached into her portfolio. She placed the mock-up on the folding table. My face. Portrait America. October issue. Cover. My name is Sylvia Park, she said, clearly and without performance, to the gathering crowd of relatives who had drifted toward the commotion. I'm the features director at Portrait America. I drove 3 hours today to meet your daughter. She looked at my mother. I assumed you knew who she was. 5 words. The most politely devastating sentence I have ever heard delivered in a backyard. My mother looked at the mock-up, then at me. Then at the 41 relatives who had heard every word. For the first time in 36 years, she had nothing prepared. The yard rearranged itself in the way yards do when something true has been said where everyone can hear it. Sylvia spread printed pages across the folding table, stills from my Appalachian documentary, festival award announcements, the cover mock-up, a printed summary of the feature's scope. She spoke for 10 minutes with a clean, specific authority of someone presenting work she had spent months evaluating and believed in without qualification. 3 films, 4 festivals, 2 awards. A cover story that would reach 200,000 readers in October. Renee Calloway, Sylvia said, has been documenting the stories of communities that everyone else has stopped telling. She has spent 12 years making sure the invisible ones get seen. She did not look at my mother when she said it. She did not need to. Derek, seated at the main table, has stopped talking. My aunt refilled her drink and said nothing. My mother stood with the mock-up in her hands and the expression of a woman watching a story she had been writing for 3 decades revised in real time by someone with better sources. My 16-year-old cousin Mia, who had been watching from the edge of the crowd with wide, uncomplicated eyes, walked up to me after Sylvia finished. "Wait," she said. "That's you." "On the cover." "That's me." She stared at the mock-up for a long moment. "That is so cool," she said simply. And the contrast with every adult in that yard was complete. The hardest part of driving home that evening was not the confrontation. It was the moment, 50 miles outside of Clover, when I pulled over on the shoulder of the highway and sat with the engine running and understood, with sudden and complete clarity, that I had spent 36 years carrying a story that was never mine, the one we don't discuss. Not because I was invisible. Because my mother had needed me to be. Because a family that had decided who mattered requires someone who didn't. And I had been cast in that role before I was old enough to audition for a different one. I sat on that shoulder for a while. The evening light was doing something beautiful to the tree line. I got out my camera. I always have my camera, and I photographed it. Not for anyone. Not for the magazine. Not for proof. Just because it was worth seeing. And I had never needed permission to see things that were worth seeing. That was always the whole point. I do not know what my mother did with the mock-up after I left. I do not know whether she put it on the wall beside Derek's framed accomplishments, or slid it into a drawer, or handed it to my father, or set it on the counter and walked away from it. I stopped needing to know. Here is what I learned across 36 years of being the one nobody bragged about. The people who decide you are invisible are not making an observation. They are making a choice. And the most powerful thing you can do with that choice is refuse to make it for them. I spent 12 years pointing a camera at people who had been told their stories didn't matter. I understood them completely, because I had been one of them. The only difference between the invisible ones and the ones who get seen is not talent, not luck, not the family that raised you. It is the decision to keep going anyway, to build anyway, to show up anyway. With your camera, your portfolio, your blue folder, your navy dress, your worn smooth challenge coin. With whatever you have that is entirely and undeniably yours. And to stand still when someone tries to introduce you as a footnote. And let the truth do what the truth always eventually does. Find its own way to the surface. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and leave your city in the comments. It means more than you know. I will see you in the next one.